Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies, and it was an awesome weekend in Kansas City for the Fightins. 22 runs in the final two games of the series. I'll tell you what they did different and what they have to look forward to on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. You may know me from some of my other work in the sports talk space. 5 years over at 97.5 The Fanatic doing sports talk radio. 3 years a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member. And this is my third year as your host of Locked On Phillies. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, and subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. If you enjoy the content, that's the best way to say thank you. Today's episode is brought to you by SupplyHouse.com. They're the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at SupplyHouse.com. The Phillies were unbelievable over the weekend. Now, we're going to talk about the series in general, and part of that is going to be the Taijuan Walker conversation after Friday night's game that saw him look abysmal. That's a conversation for a little bit later in the week as we get closer to his next start, but we will mention it. But the biggest thing, I want to start with the positives, guys. How could you not be excited after what the Philadelphia Phillies did over the past 2 days? They put up 11 runs on Saturday and 11 runs on Sunday. In total in the series, they scored 26 runs. They had 45 hits. That's their most number of hits in a 3-game series in 17 years. That's insane. I'm 29, so the last time they did that, I was, 12? What a series for the Philadelphia Phillies offensively. And they did a lot of stuff really, really well. Basically, everybody hit. But they didn't do it with the home runs. They only had 3 home runs in the entire series. So how did they figure it out? What did they do in Kansas City that was different? The pitching was solid, but the pitching has been pretty darn good. Ranger Suarez looked really good in his return to the mound, even though he only went 5 innings on Saturday. Colby Allard got the job done on Sunday. Now, when I say the pitching was good, it's everyone but Taijuan Walker. But the point is, this was just such a great, you go on the road against a really good team in the Kansas City Royals. You scuffled in Atlanta, winning only 1 of 3 games against the Braves. You needed a couple wins out there at Kauffman Stadium. You got them. It's a beautiful thing offensively. Let's talk about the strategy, because you might say, well, what in the world changed? I watched the games, but I don't know how the Phillies went from where they were to where they are now, or where they looked at least against Kansas City. And remember, real quick before we do this, and before people start ripping me saying, oh, you're going to say the Phillies are back for the 15th time. I set the parameters as winning 3 of 4 series. If you win 3 out of 4, that's when I'll officially say this team is back to being the team that they were earlier on in the season. It's a pretty good indicator, 11 runs in back-to-back games. But that would mean they'll have to win the series they have coming up starting tonight against the Houston Astros. So more work to go, but it was great approaches at the plate, using the whole field, finding ways to get guys over, not trying to do too much at the plate. And you know what's crazy, right? We talked about this last week. In the series against the Atlanta Braves, the Philadelphia Phillies saw more breaking balls in that series than they had seen in any series all year. It was a clear strategy by Atlanta that worked to perfection. They shut down the Phillies offense, and the Phillies batters were chasing left and right, trying to find a way to put balls in play, and they just couldn't. They were getting themselves out of at-bats. So he said, well, how do you go about changing that? And you have to think about it that way. You have to know how teams are going to attack you. You can't totally change your approach as far as what pitches you want to attack and which ones you don't. But you do have to be cognizant that, hey, there's a pretty defined way to attack the Philadelphia Phillies offense right now, and it's throwing off speed. Well, guess what happened in the Kansas City series? You might say, oh, okay, well, they got a team that was just throwing them fastballs, that decided that they didn't want to go ahead and continue to do what other teams have done that have neutralized the Phillies offense. No, Kansas City took what Atlanta did, and they took it even further. The new most number of breaking balls, or I guess highest percentage of breaking balls in a 3-game series, in a series in general this year, was this weekend in Kansas City. They were attacked the same exact way by the Royals pitching staff with some good solid arms, and they flat out just worked them. What you saw the Phillies do was be more selective about the pitches that they do take offers at. You're going to have some bad swings here or there when you're trying to do damage, but it was a much more just I don't even know. It didn't seem like they were just trying to hit singles though. Like that's the thing. Guys were swinging hard, and you were in a situation. Oh, excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze here in a second. But you were in a situation where you were still seeing tough. Bless me. Told you it was coming. You were seeing like hard contact. Guys were ripping balls in the gap. So it wasn't like they were taking their foot off the gas. It's just a collective approach to acknowledge, hey, this is how we're being attacked. We need to try and lay off these pitches if we can. Hunt fastballs more. Like you can't miss fastballs, but so much of baseball is just like, hey, I'm a tick off here or a tick off there, and that can be the difference between a great series and an awful one. And the Philadelphia Phillies had that. Some of the big performers in the series: JT Realmuto, a 4-hit night with 2 bombs in Game 2. Garrett Stubbs, a 4-hit game in Game 3. The catchers really coming up big for the Philadelphia Phillies. But I mean, like everybody was good the past couple of games. Listen, not just to the runs, the amount of it was 45 hits. I'm not really going to look at Friday night's game because we'll talk about Taijuan Walker in a second, but they had 18 hits on Saturday. They had on Sunday, yesterday's game, had 16 hits. That's just like, that's incredible. And they're making them count. Like, for example, 16 hits, 11 runs yesterday, 10 hits, 3 runs for Kansas City. Not that big of a difference in the hit column, but a huge one in the run column. And part of that is hitting in clutch spots with runners in scoring position, stringing together hits in spots that you need it. Guys just really, really getting ready to go after it when you have an at bat where you can, I'm going to say, do damage again. So the offense looked awesome. The fact that they did that while seeing the most breaking balls they've seen all year shows me that there is a way that they can beat this approach. The Phillies aren't just like dead in the water because teams figured out they can't hit a breaking ball. Like that's not the right narrative. The Phillies proved that this weekend. And you hope this carries over to the Houston series, and you hope this offense keeps rolling. We're going to talk about it coming up a little bit later in the episode about previewing their matchup with the Astros and getting back home and everything. But a 3-3 total road trip when you're looking at the series with the Braves that happened before and combining those two, it was great this week. Like, it's so good. I did put a tweet out where I said, oh, the Philadelphia Phillies are the best team in baseball again. Or like, not to overreact, but the Philadelphia Phillies are the best team in baseball, and they're a lock to win the World Series. Obviously sarcastic. Some people didn't take it that way because you know how social media is. But obviously I'm not – come on, folks. Really? But I do feel great about where this baseball team is coming off of this weekend. This is a win for all the positive guys out there. For all the folks that were fighting tooth and nail against the negativity, and maybe wrongfully so. Like, I'm not saying, oh, I was right the whole time. Dude, I've been wrong about this team for like 2 months. I'm glad to admit that. Like, you get them wrong sometimes. And I didn't think this team was capable of a stretch the likes of which they're still probably potentially in, but went through. But I'm going to celebrate the heck out of games where they score 11 runs back to back. Like, how could you not be excited if you're a Philadelphia Phillies fan right now? There's one way, and it's the Taijuan Walker problem. Now, we'll, again, like I said, later in the week, when we get closer to his next start, we're going to talk about the Taijuan Walker problem and how he's become just unusable for the Philadelphia Phillies. That is miserable. And to have a spot in the rotation where you feel like you're getting an automatic loss, that's the bad of the series. You saw Taijuan Walker was just like non-competitive on Friday night, and it cost the Phillies the game because they scored 4 runs. They put together some hits. They just didn't get the pitching that they've been used to, and that's on nobody but Taijuan Walker. But outside of that, I mean, I like the starts by Ranger Suarez and Colby Allard. I like the bullpen work. I like the offensive approach. I like the fielding. I liked everything from the Philadelphia Phillies in a large part of this series. And let's celebrate it, right? Let's enjoy this, please. Can we do that? Can we not just have a day where we're like, yeah, but I don't know. Let's see what they do against Houston. Let's kick the can down the road until I can be excited again. Or let's look at this and say, oh, well, the Royals, are they really that good of a baseball team? No, they are. I mean, their record right now is 72-58. They're a solid baseball team in the American League. They have one of the best hitters in all of baseball, Bobby Witt Jr., like a star to lead the team. They have what you need to make it to October and maybe even be a player in October. And you just came into their house and stomped them out 2 games in a row. Amazing. I can't say enough good things about all the guys in the Philadelphia Phillies lineup, top to the bottom. And the stars started hitting. It's crazy what happens when you get production from Schwarber and Turner and Harper. It just opens everything up and puts the pressure on other guys. Brandon Marsh had some big days. Like, you feel really good about the direction the team is heading. But again, like I tell people all the time, not to overreact like it's a football season. You can't overreact to 2 bad losses. I'm not going to overreact to 2 good wins. I'm not going to tell you this team is perfect and they're back to the team they're going to be and they're unstoppable and unbeatable. No, that's an unrealistic response to 2 games, a small sample size of the season. But that small sample size is like one nibble of your favorite meal you'll ever eat. Tastes pretty darn good. So we'll take the small. We'll hope it grows into the bigger sample sizes, which would be taking care of business against the Astros, later this week against the Braves. But nothing to do today but celebrate. The victory shirt is back on, and the Philadelphia Phillies seem to have signs of true life of getting back to maybe the team that they are. I'm not going to jump the gun. I promise. I'm getting ahead of myself. It's hard not to, but I'm not getting ahead of myself. Okay, coming up next, we're going to jump into a conversation that I want to have about why this series versus the Houston Astros is huge. And it's not about the Astros. And you know what? It's not really about the Phillies-Astros matchup. It's about something with the fan base, and it's about the series coming up after. We'll get into it as we continue today's episode. First, though, I want to tell you about our title sponsor, Supply House. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades. That's supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online, and their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. You can shop a complete inventory of over, listen to this, 200,000 parts. That's almost how many hits the Phillies had in that series. From over 400 top brands, and you can get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. You need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business, and you get to talk to a real person every time. How great is that? Pros in the skilled trades can even get a competitive advantage by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. So join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM, M as in master, like Trade Master, and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks with our friends over at supplyhouse.com. All right, let's get into this conversation that I want to have, because we're going to break down the actual series and the games and everything in this Houston series in a second. But this is not so much about the pitching matchups or the players or even the Houston Astros. Here's the potential pitfall of a bad series against Houston. You're coming home. You just scored 11 and 11 back-to-back. You've got momentum building. You feel like you could stretch this into a win streak if you're the players, if you're the fan base. All of that is great. And you hope it carries over versus the Astros. You might say, well, they're an American League team. You've got a 6-game lead in the division, so it's not like Atlanta can catch you or anything like that. Like right off the bat, unless something goes crazy wrong, it's not going to get like too close. And you play Atlanta for 4 games, so you can extend your lead right there. Why is this such a big series? Is it because Houston's a good team? Is it because where we are in the year? Well, part of it is this, right? Like, imagine these 2 scenarios. We're going to start with the good. I always start with the good. Come on, you know me. Imagine these 2 scenarios, though. First off, you go and play you come home and play the Astros, and you take 2 games out of 3. You look solid. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. It doesn't have to be 45 hits in the series, but you go out and you find a way to win 2 games against the Houston Astros. You know what happens? Your lead in the division is probably still like 6 games. It might even increase a little bit. And you have 4 games against the Braves, and you've won 3 of 4 series, which is my line for when we can determine this team is back, and you have a little bit of momentum and people are going to start to believe in this team again. You will have seen a couple of good games at home, and you say, okay, we can do this. We can potentially bury the Braves. You go out and win 3 of 4 against Atlanta. This divisional race is about over heading into September. That's the good case scenario. Now, think about this from the opposite side, right? Let's say you go out and you don't play well against Houston. Now, rationally, you could still take like 3 or 4 from the Braves and be fine in the division and have a solid lead and head into September feeling still pretty solid about where you're at in the NL East. But what's going to happen to the fan base? Like, I want you to ask yourself how you would feel about that, because I know what's going to happen. If you drop 2 or 3 to the Astros, or if you get swept by the Astros, God forbid, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. But let's say you have a bad series and the offense looks listless and all that stuff is not good. Well, you're going to be pretty nervous heading into that series with the Braves. You could be looking at a situation where the lead in the division is 4 games, and you have 4 games against Atlanta. And if they, That's the thing. You know what it is? Like if you ever played the field in baseball or like, well, yeah, I mean, in any sport, you start thinking about something bad and all of a sudden it's almost like you're drawn to it. Like if you're out there at shortstop where Trey Turner is and you're thinking the whole time before the ball's hit, man, I hope I don't make this play. Like I hope I don't make an error here. I hope I don't boot this ball. You're thinking about it. You're manifesting it. And the next thing you know, error. Like mentality is an important thing. Also, you can look at a situation where when you manifest positively, good things can happen. So it goes both ways. But my point is, if you play the Atlanta Braves and you look at it and you say, 4 games, the math adds up. We get swept and Atlanta would have the tiebreaker on the season series. I get nervous thinking about that. I'm sure the Phillies players would get a little bit nervous, but more importantly than all of that is going to be the fan base. It's going to be you out there listening to Locked On Phillies right now. Yes, you are important to the Philadelphia Phillies. You've known this from how players talk about the environment at the bank and how this fan base does wonders to make other teams uncomfortable and the Philadelphia Phillies comfortable. If the Phillies keep the momentum, that building's going to be rocking for the games against Atlanta later on in this week. You're going to have a loud, packed-out park that smells blood in the water that thinks we can kill your season, or at least your chances at the NL East right now, hated rival Atlanta Braves. And that'll be a playoff-type atmosphere. Now, if you lose the series to the Astros, or if you don't look good in the series against the Astros, whatever that may be, it'll be a playoff-type atmosphere, but it'll be like games 6 and 7 of the NLCS. That place will be nervous as all get out on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday if you know that the Braves are within striking distance. I cannot do it, folks. I don't want to be in a situation where that whole building is just kind of sitting on their hands waiting for something to happen, waiting for something to cheer about, hoping, praying that the Phillies find some way to give them something to believe in. No, that's not fun because you know what happens? You get shut out for the first 2 or 3 innings. And then instead of having a loud crowd behind you that allows you to get back into the game, man, everyone's a little nervous. You're starting to get antsy. Maybe there's some boos. And the next thing you know, that building is not the home field advantage. And the Braves start to get momentum because they can tell. They know how loud it's supposed to be in there, and they know when it's quiet. Like, that's why this series against Houston is so important. It's not just win the games against the Astros. It's set yourself up momentum-wise for the fan base, for the team, for the mentality, for everything to have your biggest series. The Atlanta Braves series, the 4-game set coming up, is going to be the biggest one of the season, regular season, unless something happens when they play Milwaukee in a couple weeks where you're fighting for like the 2 seed. But we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. To this point, the Atlanta Braves series is going to be the biggest one of the season. And you need to go into that firing on all cylinders if possible. And that's going to be determined by how you play in this series against the Houston Astros. You get where I'm coming from? Like, you want momentum heading into the biggest series of the year. The only way you build that momentum is if you take care of business against the Astros. Ipso facto, go out there and make this a great series, or else it could have more reaching effects than just these 3 games. It could affect the next 4 games, and those are a lot more important than these 3 against Houston. So ideally, what I would ask you to do is if you're going down to the ballpark on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, be loud, make it uncomfortable for Atlanta no matter what. But I can't ask that of you if the Phillies are not going to hold up their end of the bargain. This week is really, really big. It's the back end of like the last tough stretch of the Phillies schedule too. So that's also why it's important. You're going to get a chance to play some playoff caliber teams. And then for a while, you're not going to play any. Besides the Brewers, you're going to see like the Mets a couple times and stuff like that. You're going to see teams that are just not all that good that you don't have to worry about. Like the Rays are like 500. September's easy. Finish out August strong. Build your momentum, right? That's the big word. Big Mo. Momentum is the next day starting pitcher is an old expression in baseball saying that like you have a way to continue that with the right guy on the mound, but it also like plays a huge part in the day-to-day of 162 games. That's why you can't look at this series in a vacuum. You just absolutely can't. My expectation for the series, we might as well do this here. We'll preview game 1 specifically coming up next. But my expectation for the series, same thing I said about the Kansas City Royals series. Win 2 out of 3. You're capable of doing it. Like, I know the Phillies have not played consistent baseball over the past 2 months, but they've shown flashes, and they've shown their biggest flash over the past 2 games. So, yeah, you have to win this series against Houston, or I'm going to be disappointed. And the fan base is going to be upset, and that's going to carry over into the series with Atlanta. It's like when you have I played golf yesterday. I had a bad day out on the course. You know what it did? It seeped into the rest of my day. I was kind of annoyed at everything. And that might lead to an argument with someone that I never would have argued with before. Like the continuing effects of not having the momentum from this series could be drastic for the Philadelphia Phillies. So let's not even worry about that. Take care of business against the Astros. And we'll look at this in a second. You have your pitchers set up the way you need to. You got some big time arms throwing in this series for the Philadelphia Phillies. So that's my thought process on why it's such a big series outside of the obvious when you take on the Houston Astros. But coming up next, we're going to break down the X's and the O's of it, the actual setup between the pitching matchups and previewing game one and all of those things, guys to keep an eye on, to expect to do well. We'll get into the actual baseball of it coming up as we wrap up today's episode of Locked On Phillies. But let's talk about FanDuel first. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel here on Locked On Phillies. They're America's number one sportsbook. And we have something a little bit different to tell you about today. Because you might be thinking, okay, what's the special bet you should make? Or what is the money that they're cutting you as far as, oh, you get this amount back or this, that, or that. That's the typical thing that FanDuel does, right? This is awesome. You're going to want to do this. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you're going to be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel anytime. So FanDuel, not only are they America's number one sportsbook, they're setting you up to watch football season the way you should. Go ahead and do that. Check out FanDuel. And man, is that a great promotion for everybody to use with America's number one sportsbook. Okay, previewing game one and somewhat of the series coming up in just a second here on Locked On Phillies. But I do want to remind you, thank you, by the way. I got to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. Now, for your next second listen, check out Locked On MLB, the Locked On MLB podcast hosted by our guy Sully, Paul Francis Sullivan. If you haven't checked it out yet, we've had Sully on the show a couple times. You need to. It's a great time to keep up with what's going on in playoff races, outside the NL East, outside what the Phillies are doing. He's funny. He's smart. He's seen a lot of baseball in his life. He's got everything covered for you to know what you need to know before October. So check out Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's take a peek in, a gander, if you will, at this series against the Astros and the pitching matchups and all of those great things. The guys going for the Phillies, well, you got Wheeler in game one, which means you're back at the top of the rotation. He will face Ronel Blanco. More on that in a second. But Wheeler throwing in game one is probably a pretty good advantage for the Philadelphia Phillies. They are favored in the game. More on that. Aaron Nola will face Justin Verlander. Verlander, not the best version of himself. He's old, man, and he's been hurt for a good amount of this year, and some of his numbers are solid, but Nola Verlander, that's a premier pitching matchup, and Nola is also one of your better pitchers, so that's another sign that the Philadelphia Phillies have some good stuff potentially in the future in this series against the Astros. The final pitching matchup, you have Christopher Sanchez facing off against Spencer Arrighetti, and that's hugely advantageous to the Philadelphia Phillies. Arrighetti has a near 5 ERA. Christopher Sanchez has been really good for the Phillies for a lot of this year, so that feels good. I mean, you got your guys going. If you could pick anybody to throw right now a 3-game series, it would be Wheeler, it would be Nola, it would be Sanchez, and probably in that order. So you feel pretty good about what you have lined up for the series against the Astros. Ranger will probably eventually take the place of Christopher Sanchez in that discussion once he gets fully stretched out and back to the pitcher that, well, hopefully back to the pitcher that he was earlier on in the season. But let's go back to game one now, okay? Because I've already told you the pitching matchups, they seem to favor the Philadelphia Phillies. They're at least tight or in favor of the Philadelphia Phillies every single night. And tonight, man, Vegas loves the Phillies. Money line loves the Phillies, all of this stuff. Minus 175 on the money line for the Philadelphia Phillies to win. ESPN Analytics has them at a 63.8% chance. Part of that is because what they did in Kansas City. Part of that is because you have Zack Wheeler on the mound, who's one of the best pitchers in baseball. And I have to kind of bring up a tough thing from 2 years ago, but Ronel Blanco, he's a gettable pitcher. He's got a 3.14 ERA, a 9.6 record, a 1.06 whip. He has allowed 20 home runs. Not great for him. So you can hit the ball out of the yard against him. That's also in Houston. They have that short left field. And I know he travels around and throws other places. But the bank is also a hitter's park. maybe you can find a way. 136 Ks and 137 and 2/3 innings pitched. About average as far as a strikeout guy. He's only allowed 91 hits, though, and part of that is because he went 9 innings, allowing 0 hits. He threw a no-hitter earlier on in the year against the Toronto Blue Jays. And I know what you're thinking. The Phillies taking on the Astros, facing a pitcher at Citizens Bank Park who has thrown a no-hitter this year. Are the Phillies about to relive the World Series? No. And no, that's crazy to think that that's even like no. Don't let that. You remember we talked about manifesting bad things? I have to stop myself from doing that a little bit because you're looking at a situation where I don't want to even put that into the universe, even though I just did. So hopefully the Philadelphia Phillies do not repeat history on that front. As far as the guys to watch out for offensively, Yordan Alvarez is still a monster for Houston. They also have Yainer Diaz, who is going to be leading the team in RBIs with 72 coming into this series. But Houston's not quite the team they used to be. They're 70 and 60, so they're 10 games over 500. But as far as the offense is concerned for the Houston Astros, they don't really have like a lot of guys that you're looking at when you say, okay, star power. Yordan Alvarez is definitely one of them. They have a couple other guys sprinkled throughout the lineup, but Yordan Alvarez is also day-to-day. His estimated return date is August 26th, which, if the calendar is correct, is today. So we'll see if he's available to play. I don't know. We'll take a look at it. But if he's not available, that is a huge help for the Philadelphia Phillies. As far as the Phils offensively, the guys that they need to step up in this series, it's going to be tonight against the righty Blanco. You're going to need to see continuity from the top of the order when it comes to the great production. So you're going to need Schwarber to be good. You're going to need Harper to be good. I'd love to see Stott and Marsh continue to come out of their little slumps that they've been in. Well, little slumps, big slumps for those guys. But they showed some promise over the weekend, specifically Brandon Marsh, who was really, really good. I think he had like 5 hits in the series against the Kansas City Royals. Like, that's a great step in the right direction. I don't know if it's just like the Phillies. I don't know if that's he's coming out of it or if it's we all had a good weekend. And I say that as stuff falls off my building. Sorry about that. Got a little distracted. I thought my window was collapsing. Well, the window for the Philadelphia Phillies might have seemed like it's collapsing over the past couple of months, but let's see, that's how you use that to your advantage in podcasting, folks. They have a great opportunity against the Houston Astros tonight to start off a big series on the right foot. You got to win tonight, right? You got wheels on the mound. You want to set yourself up for the series win. They dropped game 1 in Kansas City, and everybody lost their minds. And rightfully so, because Walker looked bad, and you were in a series where you really needed a series win. Tougher when you've got to win the last 2 rather than winning game 1 and setting yourself up. Go out there and don't just win the game tonight, right? That's not it. You got Wheeler on the mound. You should not need a lot of runs, but you should try and find 4, 5, 6+ runs for the Philadelphia Phillies. It may be unfair considering they just put up 22 in 2 games. You might rationally expect a regression to the mean where they don't score as much in the series, but I don't know, man. This is the time to turn it on. I know I said September 15th was normally my date where I start to look at teams ramping up for the postseason, but this is the ramp up to the ramp up. You got to start playing good baseball to put yourself in position in the month of September to make this as easy on you as possible. And it's all connected, right? You play well against the Astros, you have everything we were talking about in the second segment about momentum for the Braves. From from the fan base to the players to the manager to the organization as a whole, everybody will have a better feeling if you take care of that. And then if you take care of business against the Braves because of that momentum, well, you're feeling better about the division, which makes you relax a little bit, which hopefully makes you play a little bit better brand of baseball than you have over the past 2 months. It'd be hard to play worse. And all of this feeds into a final stretch of the season that's very, very important. It really gets going today. It really got going on this road trip that just happened. They went 3-3, treaded water. They come back home. You can't go out of the 7 games you're about to play. Like 4-3 is the baseline. Anything less than that, 3-4, failure. 4-3, great. More than that, even better. So those are my expectations for the week, the series, all of this between them and the Astros. I think the Phils win tonight with Wheeler on the mound. I think you do see a little bit more continuity with the offensive approach and the production. That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies. Thank you so much for checking us out. Once again, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all those great things that really help us out here on Locked On Phillies. Tomorrow, we'll recap what happened in this game against the Astros tonight. We'll take a look around Major League Baseball, just get an idea because we haven't had an off day in a little bit, or like a true off day where there wasn't some big stuff to react to. So I want to take a peek at the standings as we always do. And well, hopefully we're just having some more fun tomorrow like we were on today's episode. But again, that's all for today's show. I'll talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.